Hello and welcome to this cafe conference session. We will focus on other sports around the world towards total access, where cafe's work is mainly focused when football, other sports are recognizing the value of improved access and inclusion for all. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Lucas Dont and I will be moderating this session. I'm a white young male and my pronouns are he or him. I also participated in the Football for Leadership program in 2019, which is a unique program to promote employment and entrepreneurship among people with disabilities in the world of football. And I'm also a wheelchair basketball player at Sidham Lions in Belgium, so I'm really looking forward to this session. Today, we will hear from Daniel Feinberg, representing the MBA North America, and Thomas Desmet from Inter-Vlaanderen in Belgium. We invite you to join the discussion on social media using the hashtag Total Access. There will be time to take questions later on in the session. So Daniel, let's come to you first. Could you tell a bit more about what the MBA is doing around accessibility and inclusion?
Well, first, I want to thank you and Cafe for having me on this program. Really excited to be able to talk about our work. To your question, the MBA is proud to have partnered with an organization called Culture City, which allows for venues in large arenas to be certified as sensory inclusive. And what we mean by sensory inclusive is a space that offers permanent and daily accommodations for those with sensory needs. And when we talk about sensory needs, we're not just talking about families living with autism. We're really referring to families who are living with Down syndrome, PTSD, early onset dementia, blindness, and hearing loss, as well as ADHD. And so there's a very large subsection of the population here in America that deals with one of those disabilities. And so what we've done is we've partnered with this organization to make sure that our arenas are inclusive and accessible to those families.
Thank you. And have you seen also popularity in these sensory rooms? When they were first used, have you seen a rise in people using them? Could you tell a bit more about that?
Yeah, and I'll speak to that in two fronts. First and foremost, at the beginning of our program, around 3.5 years ago, we really only had one arena certified as sensory inclusive. Since that time, all of our arenas have become inclusive of families with sensory needs. And what that means is, first and foremost, they provide sensory bags to all those who need it, right? So they'll walk into the arena and they'll check them out. Those sensory bags include things like noise canceling headphones, weighted lap pads, fidget tools, and anything that family may need to feel comfortable. Separately, 15 of our arenas have built out specific sensory rooms, which is essentially a quiet room for folks to go to if they're overwhelmed by the sounds, the lights, the smells of the arena. And to your question, we average around 5 to 7 families that use the sensory rooms every game in every arena. And so that's 5 to 7 families for all 30 teams in 82 games, right? Or 41 games, where we're talking about home games. And so the answer to your question is it's been incredibly popular. And not only has it been popular, it has really allowed us to sort of tie back to the business goals, right? When we're talking about using a social responsibility initiative to uplift what the business is doing, this is a prime example of that. And we are incredibly proud of the work that we've done.
As a big basketball fan and also a basketball player, I have to ask, how is it for a disabled fan to follow an NBA game?
Well, I think it's one that is ever evolving, but it is an experience that is inclusive for everyone. Obviously, here in America, we have the Americans with Disability Act, which provides a baseline of what every arena needs. But of course, there are opportunities to grow our game and to make our game more accessible, and that's what the NBA is doing. But we are just thrilled with the work we've done in the sensory inclusion space, because that, to us, is a subsect, again, of the population that ordinarily would have to leave a game early or not even come at all.
What does the future hold for the NBA and its disabled fans?
It's a great question. The one thing I'll say is we'll never be done in this space, right? We will always be working to push the boundaries of what is possible, and to ensure that everyone feels safe and can have a wonderful time and wonderful experience watching the NBA, whether it's on TV at their homes or in our arenas. And so what the future holds is us continuing to push the boundaries of what is possible to allow for fans to feel like the game is meant for them.
I think that's a great takeaway. Thank you, Daniel. Maybe last question to round it off. Basketball and the NBA in general is hugely popular around the world. What advice would you give to other sports working on inclusion and accessibility?
Well, the advice I'd give to other sports leagues and teams around the world is lean into what you're good at and sort of understand where your strengths lie and also your weaknesses. For example, in the NBA, our strength is with our players. It's who they are, what they do, not just on the court, but off the court, right? And so when communicating our sensory inclusion initiative and how important this is, we tie directly back to players who either have a family member living with a sensory need or know someone with a sensory need. So, for example, Joe Ingles of the Utah Jazz, who is Australian, has a son on the spectrum. And so we've really leaned into telling that story to raise awareness about families living with sensory needs. And that has really allowed us to connect with fans around the world. And so my advice is to lean into sort of telling those stories, because that is particularly what fans are looking for, those real stories that they can connect to.
Thank you. That's really a great story, Daniel. And also, I think storytelling-wise, it really attracts people to take a notice of this. So thank you for this. And maybe as a final message, what would you take away from this session to everyone working around accessibility and inclusion?
Well, I would simply just take away that it is incredibly exciting to see this conference taking place and to see people coming together to talk about accessibility. As I mentioned before, there is no end to this conversation, but at least having it is a positive one and really exciting for me and for the NBA.
Thank you, Daniel. Now let's go over to Thomas Desmet. Thomas, can you tell us a little bit more about Inter-Vlaanderen and what the works that you do with Inter-Vlaanderen?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having us and letting us promote the work we do. I am Thomas Desmet. I'm a white man, unfortunately already in my 40s, dark brown hair and a stubbly beard. Inter is a non-profit organization in Flanders. It's the northern Belgian region. We are an expertise center on accessibility, but we also give support to governments, to architects, building contractors, but also organizations and organizers of events. So we always start with advice on how to make things accessible, but we can also support them by helping in promotion, in communication, providing services just like audio description, sign language interpreters at events, provide educational sessions on assistance and communication to disabled persons. And we have more than 600 volunteers that can assist disabled people at those events. So me personally, I'm accessibility manager at Inter. I'm responsible for mainly sports and events. So I give advice and support on accessibility of cultural events, music festivals, and more specifically, sports like football and cycling.
Thank you, Thomas. Inter recently supported the World Cycling Championships held in Belgium. To improve the experience of disabled fans, can you tell how this partnership was established and some of the work you did around the championships?
Yeah, well, for more than 10 years now, I guess, we worked together with Golazzo and Flanders Classics. That's two big organizers of cycling races in Flanders. And they together were also the organizing committee for the World Championships cycling past September in Flanders. So they wanted to be very ambitious on sustainability, on accessibility, and so they asked us to give advice and support to make these championships very accessible. So we started with a meeting with them, with the organization, where we discussed every aspect of accessibility of the World Cycling Championships 2021. And we started making plans to make this event as accessible as possible. And then we always focus on 4 different aspects of events. First of all, communication and information, as well beforehand as at the event itself. For example, we had a special page on accessibility at the official website, Flanders 2021. There was a registration form for disabled people who wanted to use different facilities at those different locations. We communicated to all kinds of disability organizations in Flanders, so we tried to have a clear communication and information on the event and on the accessibility of that event. Secondly, we focused on mobility, so we provided parking spaces nearby at every starting and finish location of these races. We had communication on public transport and the accessibility of that public transport. We had also volunteers who could help disabled people from the parking lot or from train stations, for example, to the event or to specific zones for disabled people. And then thirdly, we also focused on the accessibility of the venues itself. There were 4 starting and finish locations of the championships for time trial, but also for road races. So we had Knokke, Bruges, Antwerp, and Leuven, the 4 cities who were starting and finish locations. So we had to make sure there were accessible routes, accessible toilets nearby, cable trays, slopes. So very in detail try to have accessibility of the venues itself. And then last but not least, the equal experience for disabled fans. That's a thing we also try to focus on, not only the physical accessibility, but also things like wheelchair stages at every start and finish location. Sign language interpreters at every ceremony. There was induction loops, so people with a disability could have an equal experience of that event themselves, whether they were visually impaired or had a hearing aid or had a physical disability. So we try to have all those efforts to make sure lots of disabled cycling fans could have a fantastic championship.
Indeed, because many people might think a cycling event, particularly a road race, would be very hard to make it accessible. But how do you think we can raise awareness that also a disabled fan can enjoy an positive experience during, let's say, a cycling race?
Well, it's very important for us in the advice we give and every aspect of supporting organizers is communication about the accessibility of those events. So that's always for us a big focus. So when we work together with those partners, first thing we do is to make sure they communicate about accessibility, to have everything on accessibility on their website through social media, so people can find the information and can be sure that they can attend these events, these sporting games, road races, and do that equally, just like other supporters at those events. For example, we don't only communicate about those accessibility facilities, but we can let them register in advance. So we make an online form where disabled people can ask for parking tickets, for a place on the wheelchair stages, for induction loops, and so on. And that way we can, a few days before the event, for example, send them all the information they need specifically in their situation. So that's something we do to try to raise more awareness on accessibility, so that disabled fans can find information and attend those races.
Thank you, Thomas. You also mentioned Inter is also active in other sports. You mentioned football. Could you tell us some more about that?
Yeah, indeed. We help in the works we do. We help every organization that could use advice and support on accessibility. So a building contractor, event organizer, a sporting club, everyone, we try to help them and give them advice on how to make their events, their organizations, their buildings accessible. We are very active on the field of events like music festivals, theaters, and in sports, as I mentioned before. Yeah, in football, we give advice on stadiums, facilities for disabled people. We do the coordination of Insight, that's the National Disabled Supporters Association in Belgium. We provide audio descriptive commentary at every home game of, I guess, five different clubs in Belgium. Also the national team of the Belgian Football Association. And then we have those inter-volunteers giving assistance to people, as for example, home games of the national team of A-Agent is one of the bigger clubs, also where we have at every home game assistance volunteers of Inter. Giving assistance to disabled supporters. Then also in other sports like athletics, where we have volunteers at the Diamond League Memorial Van Damme in Brussels. So a wide range of sports and types of events.
Thank you, Thomas. I think Inter is really doing a great work promoting inclusion, and accessibility in Belgium. So thank you very much. We also have some questions of the audience. Let's go over them. It's a question for Daniel. Do disabled supporter group exist in basketball or other sports? And if not, how can you reach disabled supporters best when they are a fan of let's say basketball?
Well, to start, unfortunately, specific disabled supporter groups don't necessarily exist in the United States, but we do make a concerted effort with our teams to reach out to nonprofit organizations or community-focused organizations to rally, groups of disabled fans to either come to games, experience games on television. And so we are continually working on the ways that we can be creative around engaging those fans, because it's super important, not only for the disabled population, but just for the game overall. The more people watching the game is better.
Thank you, Daniel. Another question about the sensory room. Let's say if there's a lot of demand for a sensory room, how do you decide, okay, this person can use it or this family can use it? What are the criteria for that?
There's no criteria for needing to use the room. If you feel like you need to use it, you are more than welcome to use it in those 15 arenas that have the sensory rooms. What I will say is, in some cases, there has been a line created, which is a testament to our work and a testament to the need. And so what some arenas have done is set a time limit for folks when they can use it, because at the end of the day, if there are too many folks in the sensory room, then it sort of defeats the purpose. And so, it's incredibly important, but we lean on our teams to create those policies to ensure that everyone is able to use it if they need to.
Thank you, Daniel. Now, a question for Thomas concerning the World Cycling Championships. Were also disabled people employed or volunteering during those championships?
I'm not sure if disabled people were at were a volunteer at championships themselves, but we have numbers volunteers that have a disability at Inter. So not specifically, I guess, at those championships from in September, but we have several disabled people being assistant, being volunteer on different festivals, events we do. So.
Thank you. Now, maybe a question for both of you. We already touched a bit about it. How can sports learn from each other to ensure disabled people have access to all sports? Daniel, maybe you can start, or?
It's a great question, Lucas. What I would say is it's incredibly important that we don't become complacent on this issue, that we continue to push ourselves and push the boundaries. One of the ways to do that is looking at other sports and see what they're doing. A lot of innovation comes out of various sports leagues, whether it's in Europe or Asia. And so continuing to monitor that innovation and finding ways that where we can incorporate some of those changes into our game is utmost priority to us. And so that's why conferences like this are so important for us to participate in and to listen and to be a part of, because at the end of the day, we have a long way to go. I've said this so many times. We have a long way to go in this space. All of us do. And so we can't stop now. We can't be complacent.
I have to follow what Daniel says. Accessibility is very important in every kind of sports we do. Is it in a stadium or is it somewhere on the field, like in a cycling race? Accessibility is everywhere the same. You have to work on communication. You have to work on that equal experience for disabled fans. You have to work on the accessibility of the venues. Is it a stadium or is it somewhere as an event? So that's an important issue for everyone. And then indeed, learning from each other on conferences like these. Audio descriptive commentary, for example, is something you can do in football, but even in rugby, even in cycling, even in other sports. So it's something we can learn from each other and then implement in every event or in every sports.
Thank you both. And maybe a question for Thomas as well. How does Inter Vlaanderen engage club and other sports when they are maybe not so keen to work together, or maybe they forget to work around inclusion, or it doesn't cross their mind? They might also have supporters with a disability.
Yeah, that's an issue we have in Belgium. We are, as an organization, we need to be asked to help them, to advise them, to support them in going for accessibility. So we are prepared to do that for clubs who ask us. But on the other hand, we notice that lots of clubs don't do that, don't ask us for advice, or don't go far enough in tackling accessibility. So that's another way we try to work on accessibility is through the coordination of Insight, for example. We do the coordination of Insight as the National Disability Supporters Association in Belgium. So there we try to have every club in that association and try to have as many disabled fans also in our meetings, so we can try to contact the clubs from within and make them aware that accessibility is an important topic they should tackle.
Maybe to go a bit further on that, so imagine you guys at Inter also contact clubs yourself, or do they always come to you directly? How does that work?
It's in both ways. We try to contact them ourselves, but we are an expertise center and a support center. So when they don't want to go along, we can't do very much. Only by, for example, Inside, where we try to help the disabled fans themselves to contact their club to make sure that accessibility is on the agenda of that club itself. So that's a bit the both ways we try to contact the clubs. But it's not easy for us as an organization, as an expertise center to have every club along with us. We can only try to make them aware as much as possible.
Thank you, Thomas. Now another question for Daniel from the audience. They say, it's great to see that there are sensory rooms, but what's the reason why they aren't at all venues yet?
Well, we're in the process of sort of building that out, but at the end of the day, these arenas are already built out. They only have a limited amount of space, and so it's just trying to find the right resources in the right space. We don't want to put people in storage closets, right? We want to make sure that there is ample room for families and people with sensory needs to go, and so. The quick answer is space, but arenas are always pushing to find new ways, whether it's bringing in sort of a trailer, right, that can sit in the concourse and allow folks to go into, instead of building out in a specific space for that. It's just it's something we're continuing to work on and innovate on.
Thank you, Daniel. Another great question. The NBA just launched a new league in Africa together with FIBA. Will you also be sharing this information about accessibility with this new league in Africa?
Of course, and it doesn't just end with Basketball Africa League as well. I mean, we are working to include these spaces and include these facilities in our WNBA arenas, in our G League arenas, and even in our 2K League arenas, believe it or not. And so, again, these efforts don't stop at the NBA. We are continuing to push the boundaries of what's possible and are excited for the future.
Mm-hmm. Also at the NBA, I think you guys are doing a lot around this topic, and as you know, you have millions of fans watching your league, and I think it's great you are including all of those people. Maybe another question for you, Daniel. Let's say on the sensory room, or let's say in NBA accessible seating, how can people find out what information? Is it on internet? Can they maybe call someone about it? How do you guys spread those informations to your disabled fans?
So fans can find it in two ways. First and foremost, it is listed on every team website where fans can find sensory kits, or those sensory bags that you can check out, as well as the sensory rooms. They're also, by the way, listed in the concourse. And so we have a piece of signage that allows folks to identify where those are. Separately, the organization we work with, Culture City, has a really, really innovative and interactive application, a mobile application that allows you to identify all sensory inclusive locations in a certain city or state. And as part of that, NBA arenas are listed on that application. So we're still, of course, finding ways to communicate where those are and what those what those facilities look like. But I think we've done a fairly good job of communicating to fans planning to go to games.
Thank you, Daniel. Now, another question for Thomas. We all know the pandemic has an effect of all of us. Did Inter have also any effect with their products concerning the pandemic?
Yeah, for sure. I'm most of my time goes to accessibility of events. So last year and the year before, loads of events were cancelled, or public couldn't attend those events. So that was a big trouble for us. On the other hand, for the World Cycling Championship, for example, we planned on doing an audio descriptive tour. At the start of one of the races, the pro men race, we tried to do audio descriptive tour and commentary for disabled people, for visually impaired and blind people. But we had to cancel that one through COVID. So we were infected, a lot by COVID on events. All kinds of events we did, but specifically for the cycling championship also, unfortunately.
And I also think it's important for a lot of people. It's like an outlet to watch sports events, whether you are disabled or non-disabled. So I think that's really important that we can still attend them. Maybe one last question for you guys. After the session is almost rounding up, but what would you take in consideration after we had this talk? What do you think is important now in 2021 in the world of accessibility and inclusion in sports?
In my case, I would say it's very important that people can have an equal experience, that supporters can enjoy a game with their friends in a stadium, at a cycling race, together with them, and have an equal experience just as all other fans at the event itself. So not only from home after the television, but also at the location itself, in the atmosphere of the event. So that's the main objective for us to work on accessibility, having people in there at the event, at the sporting game, enjoying themselves.
Thank you, Thomas.
Oh, sorry, Lucas. I would just say, I think it's really important. Yeah, I just think I think it's incredibly important that we remember that not only is this something that is important and good to do, but it's great for business. Having more people come to our games, experience the NBA, experience sports in general is good for business. We're selling tickets, and so the more inclusive we all are, the better off we all are. Right. So people are able to experience the game that they love, and businesses are able to sell tickets. And so it's just effectively communicating how this ties back to the overall business, I think, is super important when you're talking about the expansion of these efforts.
Thank you, Daniel, and also Thomas for joining us today, and to everyone who followed this session. We hope you found this very useful. And if you have questions, feel free to contact the cafe team, and they will certainly help you. Now we will also take a short break, and the conference will resume at 15:45 Central European Time with a session called Total Access for Non-Visibly Disabled Fans. For me, a goodbye and thank you. And I hope you can join this session, and bye-bye.
Bye.